Hi, everyone. This is Morgan here from Positive Approach to Math. We are moving right along with Lesson 3, the distributive property in our algebraic expression topic. Just like our other lessons, we'll begin with a little for your information, segue into a couple examples, wrap up with a summary and some helpful hints, and then we'll leave you to it with a couple of you tries. All of our you tries, you can click on a link at the end of this video that will lead you to an answer key if you want to check your work from trying it on your own. Or if you need a little extra help, it will lead you to a video, a link to a video where I will gladly break down all of the you tries. Keep up your hard work in your math journey in Algebra 1, and let's go through the distributive property. A lot of these foundational lessons that we're doing are things you're going to use not only in Algebra 1, but in every math class beyond. And eventually it's going to become second nature. Just by the end of your Algebra 1 journey, you won't even think twice. You'll see a set of parentheses and a number on the outside or a term on the outside, and you'll say, oh, I got to distribute, right? So let's talk about what distribute means and what is this distributive property. So this is a property that if you were taking the Algebra 1 keystone, it would be on your formula sheet if you're in Pennsylvania. So you would have access to that. And what it basically says is that if you have any number, A, B, and C, the distributive property says we can distribute, and another word for distribute that I make sure my students know is to multiply. You can distribute that A or multiply A by everything in parentheses. So you can do A times B, and then you can distribute to A times C. So what it's basically saying is that you will do A times B, get a number, and then you will do A times C. That is your distributive property. One thing I want to point out is they always show it with that number on the outside and the front, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. If you had B plus C, and then you had a number being multiplied on the outside and the back, you can still use that distributive property just like that. How I know it's distributing is notice that A in that parenthesis, there is absolutely nothing in between them. There's no plus or no minus sign. So when that's the case, we know that's saying A times that quantity B plus C. And we have to distribute that A to everything inside our parentheses, or I say everything in our hug, right? We got to hug everything, not just B, but we have to hug C too. So we have to do A times B, and then we do A times C. And if there was 3 terms in that set of parentheses, we would distribute to all 3. Okay, so let's go through a couple of these examples. It's really best to just dive right in. But just remember, distribute means we are multiplying. So when we combined like terms in lesson 2, we're adding or subtracting. So let's get that straight. Combine like terms, we are adding or subtracting. The exponents don't change, we're just changing the coefficients, right? The distributive property is when we have to multiply, okay? So moving right along to our first couple examples, we see a 2 on the outside of those parentheses. Nothing is separating the 2 in that parentheses, so that tells us we are multiplying. So I'm going to distribute that 2 to this x, and I'm going to distribute that 2 to this 5. If it helps you, there is technically a 1 in front of that x. So what we're really doing here is we would be doing 2 times 1x plus 2 times 5. So if they wanted you to write out this step, that's how you would write that out. Eventually, you're not going to have to write it out. You're just going to say, okay, 2 times 1x, multiply that. That gives us 2x, because 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 times 5 is 10. So a lot of times it's really okay if you jump from this line here right to that line there, okay? However, just make sure you recognize you're doing 2 times each of those quantities, okay? Our next example, we're doing 4 times 3x, and then we're going to be doing 4 times -1 because of that minus there. So what this looks like is 4 times 3x And then we're going to be doing 4 times -1. And I'm going to put a plus sign there for now because the 4 was positive. 4 times 3x, we're doing 4 times 3, which will give us 12. And then we'll just attach that x. And 4 times -1 will give us -4. So we're going to write -4, okay? So mathematicians want to be as concise and simplified as possible. So it's a little bit extra if you were to write 12x plus a -4. It's not wrong by any means, but if we have a way to just write one symbol in between, we're going to. So if we have opposite symbols, a positive and a negative, that's just subtraction, right? So we would write that as -4, okay? Let's see, moving right along. All right, now we're distributing a -3. So we're going to be doing -3 times x squared. And just a reminder, there is a 1 in front of there. And then we're going to be doing -3 times 2x, okay? So -3 times 1 would give us -3. And then I'm going to just attach the x squared. And then -3 times a positive 2 would give us a -6. So I'm going to write that and attach that x. We don't want to forget these variables to bring them along for the ride. We don't want to just write -3 minus 6. Okay, we got to bring down those variables and keep them as they are. Okay. Our next example, we have more than 2 terms, and that's okay. We just share the love, right? We distribute that 2 to not just 2 things, but to all 3. No big deal, right? I would know to stop distributing once that parenthesis stops, okay? So I'm going to share that with each thing. What is important that I want to point out that I did not yet is, okay, 2 times 1x squared, 2 times 1 is 2x squared. I wanted to point out, just remember, this -5x is one term. So it's not like you're distributing 2 to the -5 and then 2 to the x. -5x is one term. There's no plus or minus sign separating it. So you're just distributing the 2 to that entire quantity, -5x. So you're just doing 2 times -5, which is -10, and you're attaching the x, okay? You do not separate those and think of them as 2 separate terms. Remember, terms are things that are separated by plus or minus signs. So this has 3 terms in it, so we should be distributing that 2 to 3 different things, no more, no less, okay? And then 2 times 7 will give us a positive 14, so we'll write plus 14. Recognize from lesson 2, that's in standard form, has the highest exponents first, and goes in descending order. Moving to our last 2 examples, gave you some curveballs here, things you might see and might panic and think, oh, what do I do here? What number is that? So if you just see a negative symbol on the outside, it's not just a negative symbol. It is a -1. And you can think of that as multiplying everything in parentheses by -1, whether you want to just flip the signs of all of those things in parentheses or actually go through and multiply by that -1. You will see me whenever I distribute and I'm doing a problem, I always draw these arrows too. Just make sure I don't miss anything, right? So we're going to be doing -1 times 6, which gives us -6x squared. And then we're going to be doing -1 times -11, which gives us positive 11. So whenever you're just multiplying by a -1, your things in parentheses will stay the same. It's just flipping those signs. So instead of being positive, it switches to negative. And instead of being negative, it switches to positive. Okay. And last but not least, we have a fraction. Do not panic here. If you need your calculator, you're more than welcome to use it. We are doing 1/2 or 0.5 times 2x, that's one term. And then we're doing 1/2 times 18, that's our other term. So 2 times 1/2 just gives us 1. So you're going to see me write 1x for a quick second there. And then I'm going to talk about that. And then we're going to do 1/2 or 0.5 times 18, and that gives us plus 9. Now, this answer is completely acceptable, 1x plus 9. However, say this was a multiple choice question, right? It was a question that popped up and it was multiple choice, and you don't see that choice there. You don't see 1x plus 9. What you might see instead is x plus 9. Because remember, whenever you have that quantity 1 in front of a variable, we don't always write it. So these are two acceptable answers, but as we move along, you're probably going to see me favor that x plus 9. But if it helps you to write that 1 in front of it, no big deal, right? But just recognize that those are two equivalent things, okay? And so hopefully those examples were helpful. Let's wrap up and summarize some of our helpful hints, and then we'll leave you with the U tries, okay? So just to remind you, the distributive property is telling us to distribute or to multiply the number outside of the parentheses to every term inside, okay? So we are multiplying each term by the outside value. That outside value might be in the front of the parentheses, it might be in the back. And we recognize that it's being multiplied because there's nothing between that number and the parentheses. They're glued together. There's no symbol in between the outside number and your parentheses. That tells you, okay, distribute, multiply, okay? Last but not least, this is something you're going to see over and over and over again. It is simply a stepping stone of something that we're going to use all the time in Algebra 1, and pretty soon it's going to be second nature to you. So I will leave you with 6 problems if you want to try some on your own to make sure you have this skill down. You can check your work in a little bit. A video is going to pop up leading you right with a link right to the answer key. Click on that if you're trying it by yourself. And if you're a little stuck on how to distribute, click on the link below that. That will lead you to a video breaking down these 6 problems. Keep up the great work. We're just getting started on the fun. The distributive property and combining like terms all together is coming up next. Have a great day. You got this.